Yep. All right, let's go ahead and get... Can we go ahead and get started? All right, cool. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, everybody, let's go ahead and start with the roll. We'd like to call this meeting to order. Let's go ahead and start with the roll call.
Mayor Bagley.
Here.
Council members Christensen.
Here.
Hidalgo Faring.
Here.
Martin.
Here.
Peck. Rodriguez.
Here.
Waters.
Here.
Mayor, you have a quorum.
Great. Let's say the pledge.
Get some of those skinny things for my chair.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, let's go on. Actually, let's go ahead and move before we start with motions to direct the city manager to add any agenda items or public invited to be heard. Let's go ahead and move city manager comments up.
Yes, Mayor.
Are the mics on?
Hello?
Mic's
Yep,
on?
now
Okay.
mic. Yes, Mayor, Council. We actually have Dan Eman and Carol Helwig. Carol's with the Boulder County Department of Public Health, and we know we've had a lot of questions regarding coronavirus, what the city's doing. Dan's going to do a brief presentation, turn it over to Carol, and we just want to be here to answer any questions you all may have because we know that's a topic of conversation in our community.
I don't know if that's going to work, but good evening. That's not happening. Look at that. Nicely done, you. I'll get in there. Good evening. My name's Dan Eman. I'm the Assistant Public Safety Chief for the city, and I also oversee the city's Office of Emergency Management. So my purpose here tonight is to just try to give you guys an overview of what we're currently doing in response to this COVID coronavirus issue. And as Harold mentioned, we also have Carol Helwig here. She's an epidemiologist with Boulder County Public Health. She's far smarter than I am, so ask any question you want of her. So kind of to start out with, this thing is, so it's a public health-led incident, and anything that's kind of a epidemic, pandemic, I guess any kind of demic is really kind of a public health-led response because they are the city's public health entity too. They're countywide. We're going to take a lot of our lead from them. This is what they do. And we have, all the cities, all the municipalities, and the county have come together and decided to respond to this thing as a county. Harold's on board with this. We've had a couple internal meetings talking about this already. And there's a lot of systems that are already in place and a lot of systems that we're building to respond to this if it gets any bigger. Probably the biggest one that's going to have the most impact right away is what's called a joint information system. It's kind of a fancy name for all of the public information teams from all over the county, municipalities, the sheriff's office, commissioner's office, school district, hospital systems, anybody that we can kind of think of that's related to this event in any way, are coming together with public health to try to create a consistent messaging platform. Because I think all of you know that anybody in our community that spends 5 minutes on Google right now is going to either come out thinking there's nothing going on, we're going to die tomorrow, and anything in between. So what we're trying to create here is a consistent messaging source that's going out countywide. That's the intent of this joint information system. And Marika is one of the managers of this system along with the City of Boulder representative, and they're going to be responsible for making sure all of the entities involved have consistent messaging. That's probably the most critical thing we're doing right now. We also have a group that started meeting on Monday of all the agency administrators, all the city managers, the elected officials to talk about policy level issues. So we're going to do that weekly. We have the emergency management offices, Longmont, Boulder, are meeting every day with public health, the emergency planners from public health to talk about tactical level things. What do we need to do to support our county departments? What do we need to do to respond to things that are coming up? And we'll continue to do that every day. On a more local basis, our primary communication tool from emergency management to the city is what we call a situation report. And we put our first one out today, and they'll go out every day. It's something that we've used every year. We use them every year for severe weather season. And it's really a way that we can communicate, here's what we're watching for, here's the information sources we use, here's some trigger points, just a way that we can communicate with the city employees of here's what we're watching, and always trying to ask what else can we do for you. We have a group that's getting together with the hospital systems. We're expanding that out to the clinics in the next coming weeks to try to support what they're seeing. It's probably going to be one of the initial catch points of things that do come in to the county, making sure the hospital systems are involved in the planning that we do. We're starting to think about what members of our community are going to need a little additional support, and how we can start communicating with them, whether it's homeless, the assisted living facilities, all of those kinds of places. We're starting to lean forward into that planning process too. You probably saw today the Governor Polis declared a public health emergency for the state. Basically for them, that's a vehicle to activate their state emergency operations plan, which activates some state level resources and some dollars for them. It does not make dollars available for us. We have not done a local state of emergency, and we're not anticipating that in the near future, but that's a tool that we can certainly use. That's the overview of what we're currently doing to think about this issue as a city. But I think the big message that I want to leave you with is this is a county level incident, and we're going to respond to this thing as a unified county. This isn't something that's going to just pick Longmont, right? I mean, we're going to need to make sure that this is a unified response, and that's how we're planning for it. The message that we're giving to our employees is really the same thing we're giving to the community. Wash your hands. If you're sick, stay home. We're asking our managers to send people home if they're sick. Cover your mouth if you're coughing. I mean, it's some pretty simple stuff that we're trying to communicate, and I'm sure Carol will give you much more detail than that, but that's all I have for you. I'd be happy to take questions for you, and I know Carol can give you much more detail on that.
Great. Thank you very much. Keep us safe and keep us updated. Oh, sorry.
Give us something.
You're an expert, so say something.
Oh, yeah, I do have a slide deck. I don't know if you, like, how much time you want me to talk.
Well, how many slides? If it's 2 slides, yes. If it's 24, no.
Well, I'm a communicable disease epidemiologist, and this is like my favorite subject, so I could talk all night. I don't know. I could just field your questions, or if you want some visuals, we do have some slides available. I would say that Dan, though, pretty much covered most things in a nutshell. The only thing that he didn't mention is that we are also recommending that all employers, everyone recommend that people get a flu shot. A flu shot is not going to prevent COVID, but it can reduce the burden of respiratory illness in our community, and we want to do that as much as possible, anticipating that our healthcare system is likely going to be overwhelmed with people with respiratory illness. And then all those other safety messages that Dan mentioned are, there's resources available on the CDC website. Like, for example, this poster, you can get that on the CDC website very easily. Another thing that I'll mention is that we are working with cultural brokers to reach out to the Spanish-speaking community and make sure that the messaging that we're getting out there is appropriate and reaching them, and so that we're making sure that we're doing that. I don't know what other kind of information you would like to know. I guess one of the things that's most concerning to us, and the reason that we are really trying to scale up to our highest level of activation, is that there is community spread in the United States, especially in the state of Washington. Mm-hmm. The community spread there has occurred in people who did not have any connection to any travelers or to any known folks. And once that happens is when we raise our level of preparedness to the highest level, because community spread across the country is very possible right now.
Possible or likely?
I would say I don't have a crystal ball, but I would be very surprised if we don't get cases in Boulder County. I would be very surprised if we get through this unscathed.
And on that note...
On that note, wash your hands, get your flu shot, stay home if you're sick, and stay tuned.
All right, great.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Dr. Waters.
I don't know what to do with this. Well, is this on? I don't know. Can you pick this up?
Can everybody hear us tonight? For some reason,
This is just a long
all
ways
right.
away. I've got questions like probably everybody else does. Like, what are the thresholds that we reach before certain decisions are made? What kind of capacity do we have in our healthcare system, and at what point is it overwhelmed? But that would be speculation, I suppose. But what isn't speculation is who makes the calls, right? I'm involved in a planning process for an event on the 27th of March, where we would like a group of people to come together. The governor's going to be up here. It's a big deal, focused on early childhood education. So in the back of everybody's mind who's planning, what are the prospects that's going to be affected, and the real, that's speculation. But who makes the decision whether or not to ban or to discourage? I'm not certain, along a continuum. Is there a stage where someone says, and who's the someone, that we discourage gatherings? And is there a stage where who's the someone that says we're banning public gatherings? You can't use public facilities to bring people together.
So I do have a slide that shares our incident management structure, and maybe it'll be helpful to pull that up. But basically, we have a lot of our administrators and policy level decision makers within that structure. And so someone like me, I would make a recommendation to say, as an epidemiologist, I recommend that we do this to stop the spread of the disease. But then it's going to be up to the administrators, our public health director, and everyone jointly to make that call.
So it'll be municipality by municipality if we're in a municipality.
So generally the way that, is this on?
It is now.
It is now. So generally the way this will work is assume somebody tests positive. They're then going to do their work from an epidemiological standpoint to go, what's the risk? And they'll go, here's what we think we need to do in terms of managing that risk. That then goes to the director of their group, and then they provide advice to us as administrators in terms of what they're going to recommend doing. And specifically to that question, as we've talked through some of this, whether it's a school district or it's a city, we're all going to be looking to them for guidance, because they're also working in conjunction with the CDC in terms of the protocols they're issuing. They then make a decision, because they're the only ones that can really, for lack of a better word, say we need to do a quarantine, or here's what we're going to do. And so then we will all start responding appropriately based on the advice that we get for them. Theoretically, and I'm just going to give you an example. This doesn't mean that it's going to happen.
It's helpful to have.
So what you see in some of the jurisdictions is you saw the Washington Department of Health make the recommendation to the Kirkland Fire Department that said you need to quarantine your firefighters in this fire station, and they did that. So they were working in conjunction with that. Where it starts getting where there's other decisions for us is, let's say theoretically there's students that do this, and then they make a recommendation to the school district. We're then going to have to look to that recommendation to go, then what does that mean for us in terms of rec centers and some of these other components? And so it's really their guidance that'll start working us through the process based on the condition that we're dealing with at that given time, and evaluating the risk in any number of things.
So just in terms, go ahead.
I do also want to state that in statute, public health does have the authority to implement actions to control the spread of the disease. Correct. So ultimately, the legal authority lies on public health, and that is there. But we do want to do this in conjunction with our partners. We don't want to make these decisions in a vacuum.
At some point, not right now, but at some point in time, it'll be helpful to be more specific than public health, right? Give us, here's the person. They make the call. It has the force of law or whatever. There's an emergency declared, and there's no question. There's no.
It's the director of public health.
We have our public health director is Jeff Zayak, but then we also have the state health department and the head of the state health department. And there's also, I don't know what the acronym is, but it's the GERC, which is the governor's kind of emergency communicable disease group. And they also have levels of authority within this process.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, anybody else?
So, you know what? Actually, I do.
Councilmember Regal-Faring.
So if there was a case in Colorado, would we be able to know which county it is in, what city it's in, or is it just going to be an overall, it was in the state of Colorado?
There may be different situations that result in different things. For example, if we have a travel related case that has not caused any potential transmission to the community, we will likely not release the county because there's no risk to the community. But if there's a case at Longmont High School, then we likely will release that information because we'll likely have to implement public actions in accordance to that. So it depends.
All right. That would be all. Thank you so much for your time this evening.
Great, thank you.
Okay, great. Let's move on to anybody want to put anything on the agenda? All right. Seeing no one, let's go ahead and move on to public invited to be heard. Could we get the list? Thank you, thank you.
Get a lot of feedback
yeah.
from these. Sound system.
Can you guys hear that?
All right, we have one member of our community here to talk, so hopefully it will be awesome. Greg Gabler, do you want to come up and address the council, please?
Kind of feel like some of the debates, right? I got 3 minutes and 15 seconds, and I got to do it in 3 minutes, right?
There you go.
Okay.
So I'll wait till after you say your name and address, though.
Yeah. I'm going to read it. Hello, my name is Greg Gabler. I've been a teacher and a football coach at St. Vrain Valley School District for 25 years. I have held a contractor's license in Fort Collins and Longmont for 39 years. I worked as a teacher for 9 months and as a contractor for 3 months at least every year that I can remember. Without the second income, I don't know how I've been able to do and live in Boulder County. After retiring from teaching, it was clear that my retirement, from PER, though pretty good, would not be enough to give me a very good retirement. I hadn't been able to accumulate any meaningful savings until I quit teaching and went into building full time. The savings, however, made little income supplement to my retirement, as my interest for the whole year, with the interest rates the way they were, was $41. A realtor came to me and asked me if I wanted to build a sixplex. My answer was yes, but my thought of losing what little savings I had was daunting. I soon found out that I hadn't put enough money away to qualify to build the project, and so my son and daughter-in-law said they would be partners with me. With some trepidation, I put a contract on the property with contingency to do my due diligence. I went to pre-app meetings. I visited the lady in the building department who did permits and got an estimate for my permit. I did estimates for all of the buildings.
Actually, you know what, Mr. Gell, let's stop. Let's fix this mic because we have time tonight and I want people to pay attention. I want to hear, and it's distracting. No, you're not on the clock. I'll have you start over. Sorry. I mean, we're walking around the room, and so could we fix the feedback?
They're escaping.
No, it's not you. It's been on all night.
It's me.
But
Test,
nobody
test,
cares
test,
about
test,
hearing
test.
us, so.
Test, 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 test.
You still have a hum over.
Test, 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 test. Test, test, test. Test, 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 test. Test, 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 test. Mayor, why don't you test? There you go.
Test,
Trey.
test, test, test. Okay. Let's try this again.
John, can you hear us? John Fryer. Thank you.
All right,
That's
cool.
sounding better.
Sorry. Mr. Gabler, why don't you go ahead and start over?
Just
We'll
start
give you an
all
extra
over.
minute and a half.
You got it.
No, go ahead. Go ahead and start from the beginning. Go ahead, please.
Or anybody.
That's all right. Nope, you're
I'm
okay.
going to say I've been a teacher and a football coach in the St. Vrain Valley School District for 25 years. I've held contractor license in Fort Collins and Longmont for 39 years. I worked as a teacher for 9 months and worked as a contractor.
Yeah, hold on. We're still bad. Is it? I can talk loud.
Nobody told him they had to do this. No, like, nobody told him about the move to the library.
Yeah, this is a huge lot of trouble for them.
I'm not on. There.
There it is.
Test, 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 test.
It was just a really long time ago.
Right, you try now.
Test, 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 test.
Test. Oh, okay.
No. You gotta unplug it, Sandy.
Maybe just set the other mic on the floor in case it's a proximity thing. Yeah, should.
Nope.
Still hearing it though.
Still doing it. Test, 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 test. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Test, 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 test. I'm not hearing a buzz. Cool. Good job, Lachlan. All right, let's go ahead. If you want to start again, we'll go for it.
Third time's a charm.
How could I change this?
There we go.
I've been a teacher and a coach at St. Vrain Valley for 25 years. I've held contractor's license in Fort Collins and Longmont for 39 years. I've worked as a teacher for 9 months and as a contractor for 3 months every year. To make it possible for me to live in this area. Without the second income, I don't know if I'd been able to do so. After retiring from teaching, it was clear that the retirement provided by PERA, though good, was not enough to have a meaningful retirement. I hadn't been able to accumulate any meaningful savings until I quit teaching and went to building full-time. The savings, however, made little income supplement for my retirement, as my interest for a whole year with the interest rates they were was $41. A realtor came and asked me if I'd like to build a sixplex in town. My answer was yes. It's always yes. But my thoughts of losing my little savings was a little daunting. I soon found out that I hadn't put enough money away to qualify for the project, and so my son and daughter-in-law said they'd like to be partners with me. With some interpretation, I put a contract on the property with contingency to do my due diligence. I went to my pre-app meetings. I visited the lady in the permit department who gave me an estimate for my permit. Actually, she said it was better than an estimate. And I did all the estimates for all of the building. It was marginal, and I was leery, but my son encouraged me to go forward. We bought the lot, hired architects, engineers, and committed all of our cash to get going. We were assigned a planner to work with us, and we went forward full speed. We submitted our site plan and set goals to have our permit by January 1st. Along that time, my bank called me and said, "Did you know the city was considering an additional fee for affordable housing?" They said that I'd have to come up with that money to handle any increases. I went to the mayor and I said, "I can't do this." He assured me that my project was exempt for 2 reasons. It was too small, and I would be grandfathered in. I went back to focusing on my plan review and architect plans. We got our site plans back after a first submittal with lots of notes to correct, but my planner said, "Your plans are excellent. You clean up those red lines and we will be able to get this thing through very quickly." She even said, "You can submit for the building review of your building plans. It's that good." That's not usually done without some sort of thing on the builder. So I submitted my plans and paid a plan check fee for that of about $5,000. It was then that I was told my cost had doubled from what I was estimated from the building department. Another big blow to my finances. We still had our goal of starting January 1st, and I went often to see my planner to help push her through my approval. I'm a kind of pushy guy. After numerous visits, I found out that she was on an extended medical leave, and no substitute planner was assigned. During this time, council passed an ordinance and set 2 weeks or so to get plans approved. My focus changed from January 1st to panic. My planner came back and apologized for the circumstances her illness had caused. She said she would do something to get an approval before the 21st deadline. I don't know what it was. After 2 days, I saw her again, and she said she was told she couldn't do it by somebody above her. A few days later, I ran into another person in the lobby who I'd gotten to know very well. And by the way, I really like the people I learned and worked with within the city. They were great. This guy looked at me and he said, "Greg, we've had your plans entirely too long. I will hand deliver them and get approval and I'll predate them." Again, somebody up the line said, "No way." I have finished the project and I have paid my fee. I had to pay my fee to get renters to go into the building. But I've had to substitute money from landscaping, blinds, and interest that I need to carry the project till I get it fully rented. I'm in a financial problem, and it's not my fault.
Thank you. All right. And I actually, I cheated because we interrupted him plenty of times, so I gave him the full time. All right. Thank you. All right. Let's move on to special reports and presentations.
So we're in the study session.
We going to move on? No. Okay.
Yeah,
All
we don't
then
have any
Let's
special.
start with the update on the climate change.
Okay, I'm good to go, right?
Or do you want what are you here for?
Yes, this.
All right. Okay
yeah.
then. Yes. I don't want you to
At
go
least
away.
that's
I want you to.
all I prepared for tonight anyway, so.
Yes.
All right, Mayor Bagley, members of council, I'm Lisa Knobloch, Sustainability Program Manager, and I'm here tonight to give you an update on the Climate Action Task Force and climate action in general. And if I get too far away from the mic and you can't hear me, let me know, because I feel like you have to be really close to this thing. Or if I'm too close and it's making a weird sound, let me know. Let me know. Okay, so Climate Action Task Force, you all saw a variation of this slide at the retreat a couple weeks ago. The Climate Action Task Force has now held 5 of their 8 meetings. They have drafted recommendations on the 3 topic areas on the left-hand side, and I will go through a pretty high-level review of those recommendations with you tonight. And they have now moved into developing recommendations for the education, outreach, adaptation, resilience, and land use. And one change from when you saw this slide last is they did decide to include waste management in the land use topic area. So you'll see recommendations around that and included in land use when that comes through. As I mentioned before, equity is incorporated throughout all of the recommendations, and there will be a section also on governance, plan evolution, and adaptation. So looking at what do we do once the report is completed. So I'm going to run through these pretty high level. If you have any questions, feel free to holler. I'll do my best to answer. I'm not the drafter of these recommendations, and I only have summaries. So I'll do my best to get answers for you. I'll follow up if I don't have specific answers to your questions. So the Building Energy Use Group, the recommendations are focusing on code updates. So we already have a policy in place where we adopt and implement the most recent code updates every cycle. And this would be looking at including things like solar and EV readiness in the next round of code updates coming in 2021. They're looking at an electrification recommendation. That group has decided that that's a pretty weighty and complicated topic, and they don't have enough time as they would like to really dive deep into the research that they need to come up with a comprehensive strategy around electrification. So their current draft recommendation is to form a feasibility committee to spend some extra time doing the research needed to really come up with a solid electrification strategy. Focusing on commercial energy efficiency through things like benchmarking and retro-commissioning, and then also residential energy efficiency through expanding and increasing participation in our Efficiency Works program and expanding the low-income energy efficiency program as well. And then a cross-cutting recommendation that they're looking at is establishing a climate action fund. And so that would be identifying a number of different revenue sources that would help fund all of our climate action work, because they recognize that in order to do a lot of the things that we're going to be proposing, we're going to need additional resources for staffing and implementation, and they want to look further at potential alternative revenue sources and establishing a fund to support that work. The Renewable Energy Group are looking at a number of complementary recommendations, starting with smart grid. So that's really accelerating the AMI installation and looking at developing a plan for how to use that technology when it's only partially implemented, so not having to wait until it's fully completed. Establishing a home energy management system, so a program to really establish homes to optimize energy use and really set them up to manage distributed energy resources as they come online. Establishing a 5-year plan for developing a major inventory of distributed energy resources that are managed in Longmont. Continuing to aggressively pursue internal and external policies for greenhouse gas reductions. And then workforce development, so looking at how all of these things are going to be creating new workforce development opportunities for Longmont, and how we can set up programs to really help train people up for that, as well as understanding what are the sectors that might be negatively impacted as we move away from fossil fuels, and making sure we have programs in place to retrain folks and get them into new sectors of work. The transportation group is looking at greater access to and participation in transit, biking, walking, things that get people out of single occupancy vehicles, looking at partnering with schools on multimodal options, looking at opportunities for incentivizing new programs for alternative modes of travel, renewable sources to power transit, so that's not only electrification but other alternative fuels as well. And then looking at employer-based programs like alternative work schedules to create more flexibility in the workplace to reduce the need for driving overall, or to help create more flexible schedules to reduce congestion and things like that. So as I mentioned at the retreat, we're also going through a community engagement process concurrently to inform the public of the work that we're doing and to gain feedback on draft recommendations, to understand how we might strengthen the recommendations, what are potential impacts or negative consequences that we might not be thinking about, and then what are we missing. And so where we're at in that process, we've developed and distributed flyers throughout town that are driving folks to the Engage Longmont website. We started tabling at a number of different community events. We're launching a questionnaire in the next couple of days. We'll be doing presentations with a number of different community groups, setting up educational kiosks at key community locations, and working with volunteers to do what's called kitchen table conversations with friends, families, neighbors, coworkers, things like that, and then bringing that information back to the Climate Action Task Force. So the next steps, again, they'll be drafting their recommendations for the new subgroups that we talked about. They have a joint meeting with the Just Transition Plan Committee on this Thursday, the 5th, and that's a 3.5-hour meeting where each of the subgroups that's completed recommendations to date will have an opportunity to go do a deep dive into one or two of the recommendations with the Just Transition Plan Committee, who will do essentially an equity analysis on those recommendations and talk through possible equity impacts and look at opportunities for increasing the equitability of those recommendations. Again, they'll be able to incorporate all of that feedback and from the feedback from the community engagement efforts to refine and finalize their recommendations. The report is due April 8th, and then that'll be presented to council on April 14th. And then in addition to what's happening with the Climate Action Task Force, we wanted to mention that the city also is really taking a number of steps to accelerate our work, also in context of and in alignment with the climate emergency resolution and the resolution to transition to 100% renewable energy. So we've been working a lot with staff to identify what we're already doing and some additional strategies that we can take to help accelerate those efforts. I'm not going to go through every single one of these. I'm just going to pull out some highlights. But again, if you have questions on any of these, please feel free to holler. As I've mentioned, we're in the process of updating the greenhouse gas inventory. That's well underway. We have a lot of that data collected, and our consultants right now are in the process of modeling all of that information, and we'll bring those results back to you all when we have them in the next couple of months. We've talked to you about, we're doing some energy efficiency assessments at a number of our city facilities. We've just recently worked with the contractor on that to include an electrification component to that, so looking at opportunities for fully electrifying those facilities as well. We recently received a grant to transition some of our city land to low water turf and to do some demonstration and research on opportunities around not only reducing our water use on city property, but also utilizing plant materials that reduce the need for mowing, which will reduce our greenhouse gas emissions associated with fuel use from those types of operations. And then as Dave Hornbacher has talked to you about, he's working with Platte River Power Authority on a distributed energy resource plan. And again, as I mentioned, that's a focus from the Renewables Energy Group as well. That'll have the recommendations from the Climate Action Task Force around distributed energy resources. So we've also identified a handful of quick wins, so things that we think would take few to little resources and have little to no negative impacts that we can put into place relatively quickly to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So one of those things is telecommuting and web conferencing. That's something that the city already does, but there's not a lot of consistency across departments around how people are utilizing that. There's not a lot of understanding across city staff about the technology that's available to folks. So that's looking at promoting that, creating greater educational opportunities so people know how to use the technology that we have available. Looking at potentially replacing some of our fleet vehicles with e-bikes when possible. Prohibiting plastic and disposable promotional giveaways. That's something that we do a lot across city events that we could look at changing our practices around that. It's shifting to a 10-hour workday or requiring telecommuting 1 day a week at facilities where that would be possible, so we can actually shut down one of our facilities for a whole day and save all of the resources that are associated with that. And then prioritizing energy and water efficiency and low emissions practices in park development projects. So those are just a handful of things that we could put into place pretty quickly. And And then new strategies, these are things that we would need council direction on if these are things that you would like us to pursue, and would also probably likely need additional time and resources to really dive into these and get the details on them. One of the things would be looking at incorporating a climate change section or topic into all of our city plans, so making sure that we're addressing climate change comprehensively across the organization, requiring LEED or other green building standards in all new buildings or major renovations, looking at renewable energy opportunities at Nelson, Flanders, and Button Rock, and then looking at something like a universal recycling ordinance. And I know Bob and Charlie are coming to you guys in a couple weeks to really go much more in depth into some of those opportunities around waste diversion and reduction. A couple of things I just wanted to make sure are on your radar, if they're not already, some upcoming events that are tied to climate action work. Tomorrow is the Platte River Power Authority Community Focus Group, where they'll be talking about some of the findings coming out of their integrated resource plan. So if you're not aware that that's happening, it's tomorrow from 6 to 8 p.m. at the 17 Place Event Center. And then also tomorrow is the Linking Longmont, which is a transportation-oriented event at the museum from 5 to 7 p.m. So just to have some things on your radar. Oh, that didn't come out well. Sorry for the the color on that. I didn't realize it changed with the web link there. But I just want to make sure everybody always knows that for more information or for information on how people can get involved with sustainability work and climate action work, they can always go to the sustainability page. We have all of our previous quarterly reports on there. We have all the information about the Climate Action Task Force as well as our contact information. So that's where we're at. Does anyone have any questions or comments they'd like to share?
Councilor Martin?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Can you go back one slide before that? Some of these I'm a little confused about. Are these for city actions, internal city actions only?
They're things that staff can take on internally, yes.
Okay, because the require LEED or other green building standards in new buildings and major I think that's going to come out of the buildings as a general requirement for the next code update. Is that correct?
Not specifically that I've heard, and again, this is coming from recommendations from staff that we've asked to identify potential strategies that they could put into place as well. Did you want to add something, Harold?
Am I on? So I think there are some of the recommendations that will come into the code conversation that Lisa touched on that'll be in the future. What we're saying here is in terms of how we look at our construction projects that are ahead of that conversation, we will look at them under this lens. So this is really something we can do ahead of that.
Okay.
Yes, thank you for that clarification.
Dr. Waters?
Thanks, Mayor Bagley. What you have listed as recommendations are kind of categories in which recommendations have been or are being developed, yeah?
Yeah, they're, high level, yes.
So you didn't share them with us tonight. Is that because, or in preparation for this, is that because they're just not ready, they're too drafty?
They're pretty drafty, and I just got them on Thursday. So we talked through them Thursday at the Climate Action Task Force meeting, and they now have some time to go in and tighten up their recommendations according to the templates that I showed.
It's a tight timeline, but here's the one thing I would ask you to think about. As I look at the timeline and the public engagement process and when you're coming back to us, which all is driven by the initial timeline and the budgeting process. So if we're going to do something with a climate fund, it needs to be in front of us before we make budget decisions. But the one concern I have, Lisa, is there's a ton of work. All of it's good, I'm sure. Big, powerful ideas. I'm going to feel a little squeezed if we're the last ones to see recommendations after they've been processed by the community, and you get the community engagement process, and they're kind of rolled up into, okay, what do we do at that point in time other than say, bless them, right? If you want meaningful, if we get a chance to have a meaningful part in this,
It's going to go to you. It's going to go to the council. Am I on? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
It's going to go to the council first, And then
Yes.
we will then, off of the council conversation, then go through those other community
Okay.
involvement
Well,
processes.
maybe I
Well-
should have seen that and just didn't.
Yeah, so to clarify, we are going through a community engagement process in the month of March to get
That's what it
feedback.
sounded like.
Yeah, so, and the draft recommendations are more of these category. They're not super in-depth. It's just to try to get a sense of, one, we're trying to bring the community along with
Yeah,
us
I
in this
get it.
conversation
It's real
as
important.
much as possible,
Just-
and to try to get a sense of, are there negative consequences that we might not have on our
Just a
radar?
heads up.
You're-
It looks
Yeah.
like we could get squeezed on it. I'm just saying.
No, and it's partly to help inform the Climate Action Task Force as they finalize
right.
their recommendations before they come to
Not a
you.
question for you.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose it's a question for Harold, maybe Joni. And at the risk of beating a dead horse, I'm going to beat it some more. On slide 4 of 12, tell me which of those I could consider as an extraordinary benefit and expect to see proposed if we were to allow developers to deliver to us extraordinary benefits in the context of a metro district. Which of those might I be able to expect to see in an application?
Probably the distributed energy resources.
Yeah.
That's the most.
How about carbon-free neighborhoods? Wouldn't that be the next to the last bullet? Control of
Yep.
greenhouse
Correct.
emissions? What about smart grids? I mean, what's on that list other than workforce development that wouldn't be a legitimate, extraordinary benefit presented to us as an option if we thought it was a high enough priority? We're talking about a climate crisis, and we've taken off the board, off the table, as a council, the opportunity to include those extraordinary benefits in new development in this community. That's not your problem to solve or to address. But I just want to say, it just makes no sense to me, on the one hand, to claim crisis, and on the other hand, be unwilling to get smart enough, to learn enough, to figure out how to take advantage of those opportunities as new housing stock comes into the community. Thank you.
I also want to get a different point. You all will be the first to see the specific recommendations and information. The specific information's coming to council first.
Well, my comment wasn't directed at anybody on the staff. You understand that?
No, not this.
It was
the
directed at
previous
my
question.
colleagues up here. Yeah.
Previous question is the one I was referring to.
All right. Anybody else? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. All right. Let's move on to item 4B, potential ballot item for debt financing of water projects. The illustrious Dale, your automaker, the one, the only.
Mayor Bagley, members of council, I'm Dale Rademacher, Deputy City Manager, and here tonight to talk with you really fairly briefly on a particular issue that we have talked with you in the past about, and that is on the financing strategies that we believe are necessary for the city to realize the resources necessary to maintain the city's treated water and water delivery systems to our community. Many of you were on council when we did the Integrated Treated Water Master Plan several years ago. That document identified upwards of $200 million of resources that are going to be needed to both expand but primarily maintain this system that the community has come to rely on for the delivery of water. Inherent in that overall plan and also embedded in the rates that you approved last fall was continued debt financing as one of those options to get to that point. Jim Angstead is going to talk with you a little bit about some of the projects that we are believing are necessary and sort of qualify for that type of a financing strategy. And also the intergenerational benefit that is derived through a debt servicing approach. In other words, current people pay it as well as future residents that come into our community. And so it really does try to balance out that obligation in addition to it being a very flexible tool for us to use and balance the cash financing alternatives with the debt financing mode. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Jim. Really what we're looking for tonight is we believe in order to stay on track, in particular with the Nelson Flanders treatment plant expansion, it is really necessary that we would seek voter approval this fall at the 2020 general election to issue additional water bonds for that particular project. We're not asking for a formal vote tonight to place it on the ballot, but rather whether you want us to continue to pursue the effort and do the necessary work such that we would bring that to you for your consideration this summer. With that, I'll turn it over to Jim.
Good evening, Mayor Bagley, City Council members. Jim Angstadt, Director of Engineering Services with the Public Works and Natural Resources Department. I'm going to go ahead and just make a note here and cross off my first item because Dale already pretty much covered it. So we'll go to the second slide. In 2013, the city completed the Integrated Treated Water Supply Master Plan, which identified the capital needs for the city's water utility for the next 20 years. In order for the city to continue to provide safe and reliable drinking water to our residents and our customers. The plan identified the cost for these, for our basically our capital needs at over $200 million. To date, staff has been working on some of the critical short-term projects, but we are now at a point where we are ready to advance the debt financing component of the financial plan that supports the larger capital projects. So the first project we want to just quickly throw your way is, as Dale had mentioned, the water treatment plant expansion at Nelson Flanders. The city has 2 water plants which provide our treated water to our residents. Nelson Flanders plant and the Wade Gaddis plant. The Wade Gaddis is the older of the 2. It was designed with an older filtering process, and it can be challenging for our operators to provide water that meets current drinking water standards. An expansion of the Nelson Flanders plant will provide the capacity and then as part of that project, we would also decommission Wade Gaddis. Another potential project is the North St. Vrain pipeline. This is located north of Lyons. The pipeline carries raw water from this North St. Vrain Creek to the Nelson Flanders water treatment plant. Pipeline was constructed in the 40s and 50s. And as you can see, one of the challenges is there are access issues. The photo on the right shows that the pipeline, because of its age, has been deteriorating. And it makes it an ideal candidate for replacement. So another alternative project we're looking at is the Price Park Reservoir. The original reservoir was constructed in 1923. We had improvements undertaken in the 70s and 90s. This is located over by the Sunset Golf Course. The facility is reaching the end of its useful life. It is displaying some leakage from the liner. There are some openings in the roof that are requiring extensive maintenance, and state inspections have called for a higher degree of maintenance to meet current standards. So that's just some of the quick highlights of some of our projects. We are looking for council direction. But as Dale indicated, as you're aware, debt financing of projects is subject to voter approval. And in the past, residents of Longmont have been highly supportive of the city's effort to improve our public utility infrastructure. Other examples of that are we did bonds for the wastewater system as well as the storm drainage system. So this evening, Public Works and Natural Resources is requesting City Council direction on moving forward for us to continue our efforts to prepare for possible placement of this issue on the ballot for the November 2020 general election.
Councilmember Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. Mr. Angstead, is this already secured bonds, or is there a tax associated with the bond issue to secure?
I'm going to have some of our wonderful staff come up and answer that question.
Councilmember Martin, the bonds would be paid for by water rates. There's no taxes involved.
Okay.
And it would be secured by the rates and the rate increases that you have already codified. So we don't need to go back and do yet another adjustment to the rate fee strategy that you put in place, which is a 5-year plan of rate adjustments.
Yes, okay. So that means that we are asking for bond authority and we're not asking for any more money from the ratepayers or the taxpayers. That other than what is already in the plan.
Correct. Other than what you have already codified. But to be clear, the rates are increasing. They are scheduled to increase each of the next several years. And so, the way I would say is that we have already laid out the rate structure necessary to fund the capital improvements necessary for the next several years without having to increase the rates even further than what you have already approved. Does that make sense?
Yes, I just wanted to make sure that was out there. If I could make a statement while I have my mic working, I would like to say that I think it is important in the face of what we're looking at evaluating in terms of the climate action task force recommendations, that our ongoing planned infrastructure updates happen on schedule before some of these major activities that were unanticipated hit us. So I'm in favor of proceeding with this if it's at all possible.
All right, see nobody else. I've got the only question. I'm going to make a motion when I ask this question. So we've had ballot. So this is on a scale from 1 to 10. This is like a 10, right? We need to fix our water's infrastructure. I want to make sure that we don't have the same mistake. We didn't need a swimming pool and ice rink, right? But we've learned some lessons, which was moving forward with a ballot initiative or a ballot measure without having buy-in from the community, specifically certain members of the community. I'm going to make a motion that we move forward, but I think it would be foolish if we just put it on the ballot. I think we need to hold community meetings. I think we need to pay to, market as to what the needs are and why we're doing this. We need to market to make sure that people understand that we're not going to be additionally increasing rates, that we will not be asking for a tax, because it will get muddy and people will start complaining that we didn't take it to the public and we didn't, and even if we do, they're still going to complain about it. So we have to go over the top, no surveys, meetings in your face, call Gordon, call the people call them and just say, hey, please attend the meeting because we're going to need your support or else they're going to kill it.
Mayor Bagley, if I could respond to that real quickly. That's exactly why we're here in the first part of March, because I agree with you. I believe we need to communicate and talk with our community about the very need. This is, in my estimation, not a want to have. This is a need to have. If you value having clean, reliable water for your community. So I put it in that category, but I might be a bit biased coming from Public Works, and I'll admit that. And so, yes, our intent is to work very closely with Marika and the entire city public information team to really have a good community dialogue around this, such that when we bring this to you later this summer for your formal consideration of it, you will have that information as well.
Okay. Then I'd move that we instruct staff to move forward with efforts for possible placement on the ballot for the 2020 election.
Second.
All right. Seeing Dr. Waters.
So is that what we're doing tonight? I thought you were going to bring it back. Just
move forward.
The motion is to move forward to prepare for a potential ballot issue and for you to make that decision. And I believe it's the August timeframe.
Yeah,
August is when you will be voting to formally place it on the ballot or not.
Can I make one editorial comment?
At the latest.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Yeah, you can do it.
I mentioned, I think last Tuesday night, this news article or television news piece we'd seen just before I left to come to the meeting about a water main. I think it was in St. Petersburg, Florida. It may have been Fort Lauderdale. But I mean, it was catastrophic. Pardon me?
Sewer main.
It was a sewer main, yeah. But it was a catastrophic failure. And what we're trying to do is avoid that, right? Those kinds of experiences. So to the degree that in building the case that the mayor's talking about, we could build a portfolio of examples of where people have failed to do this because they continue to defer and defer and defer.
Carol's got several.
In all honesty, I've lived through it. On the backside of shortly after I obtained the position I was in the previous community, we lost water to about 75% of the community. We also had a major sewage leak that spilled thousands of gallons of raw sewage into the river, and had to very quickly completely restructure the capital improvement plan to try to get ahead of that cycle. And if you don't plan and you don't look out 20 to 30 years, you will create a significant financial need.
Not if, but when.
Right, it's not if but when. And so my experience and what I've always said is I never want anyone to be in that same position in the future. And so we have to be very focused in terms of how we're managing the system and how we're looking into the future.
I'm just
I
talking
don't want
about
to
a
go through that
campaign
yet.
with, let's not be.
So I can give you personal examples of that.
I did want to end with one thing before you vote on that. We had a paragraph in the communication about the street fund. I know there was some council interest on whether we should or shouldn't move forward as well to potentially consider some sort of a debt servicing package on the street fund. We are working on that. We're not ready to bring that to you for discussion yet. I would think in the next 30 to 60 days we'll have that discussion, just so you know that.
And part of that conversation is when we get information like we received last week about a $4 million grant that starts changing how we're evaluating the financial considerations. And there's another grant that we're going to be going for, and I think that's due the answer will be midsummer. Is that what we heard? Yes. And so there are things that we need to also wait on to really understand what that need is.
All right. Thank you. There's a motion on the floor. All in favor, say aye. The motion is to direct staff to move forward on the preparations to put this on the 2020 ballot. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. All right. The motion passes unanimously with Councilmember Peck absent. All right. Let's move on to 4C. We doing okay? It's 8 o'clock. We've been going for a little over an hour. We're all right? Right? All right. 4C, healthy beverages for children's meals.
Mayor, members of City Council, my name is Karen Roney. I'm the Community Services Director. And as you recall, earlier this year, there was some discussion among City Council about healthy beverages with children meals, and the council provided some direction to staff to bring back for discussion at a study session possibility of bringing forward an ordinance. So tonight, this is that discussion. We have 9 slides. We have 3 or 4 people who are going to be making the presentation. And I will wrap that up with some questions that you might have, and really to get some direction from council about if you want to pursue us doing more work and bringing back an ordinance about healthy beverages with children meals. So I want to introduce Olga Bermudez, who is with Children, Youth, and Families, and she will go over the first 3 slides with you.
Good evening, Mayor Bagley and City Council members. I'm Olga Bermudez with Children, Youth, and Families. So I want to talk today a little bit about the process. So, this has been like a long process. I want to say 3 years working with the community. So the Healthy in Longmont is a coalition that was conformed between parents. It was also community members, children, youth, and families, local businesses, public health, the state, and national health organizations that came together really just to look and to see how we're going to be able to support our children, how we're going to make sure that our children are really healthy. So this coalition started working at bringing the messages into our community. So through different community events, like Cinco de Mayo, especially targeting the Latino community. Also the Colorado Latino Festival and Unity in the community. So this coalition was going to different events, just bringing the information, bringing some educational tools so people were really aware of their consumption. So, through really dynamic exercises, so engaging the community, asking questions, and through games. So parents and kids were learning really about the amount of sugar they were consuming. And we were really amazed to see that a lot of parents were not really aware of this, that they were not really thinking that, a kid in a glass of water, 90 ounces, sometimes they can consume between 8 to 10 spoons of sugar in one drink. So through this process, a lot of articles were published in the Times Call and then also in our local magazine, and some letters to the editor also were published. And multiple presentations were done at the schools, middle school, elementary school, and high school. Also presentations at Children, Youth, and Families, presentations at Salud Clinic. Also, they collaborated with this effort. And also the Hidden Sugar campaign was promoted at Clinica, Longmont United Hospital, and through other organizations. So this message was just into the community through these 3 years. And also through the Mayor's Book Club, we always send an insert. So we send that the information about the impact of the sugary drinks, to families. So we sent this twice, so that was able to reach like 1,325 families that we were able to work with. And messages were sent also through Facebook, Twitter, and social media. And also outreach was done through the summer meals programs. We have a meal program for the last 3 years. So this group have been going to the meals programs and educating, again, parents and children about the impact of the sugary drinks. And also the farmers market also was an outreach done. Here in this slide, you can see all the different organizations that have been pledging and supporting this effort. So if you see this slide, you can see Salud Clinic, you can see our local nonprofits, and also you can see business, the Roots and the Jefes is also one of the business that have been really supportive. And actually tonight we have Sean, that is a business owner. So we reach out to them, and also we have that support. Also you can see the American Heart Association and the American Diabetes Association. So this group hasn't been working just alone. So this is a coalition really trying to tackle this issue from so many different perspectives. And now I want to talk a little bit about the ordinance. So the ordinance is not a really punitive ordinance. Pretty much what we are trying to accomplish here is the restaurants will be offering, when they have the children's meal, they're going to be offering a healthy beverage. And a healthy beverage, the definition will be water with no other natural or artificial sweetness, milk with no dairy substitutes, with no added natural or artificial sweeteners. So pretty much will be water, sparkling water, or milk without any sugar. At the restaurants, they can sell another type of beverages. If parents request that or the children request that, they can also, they will be able to provide that beverage. So now I would like to introduce Tessa from Public Health. So it's gonna keep providing more information about the work that Public Health have been doing.
Good evening, Mayor Bagley and City Council. So I know you all have heard a lot about this, and I'll keep it brief, but we just wanted to be really clear on what the policy says. So our definition of a children's meal is a meal that is advertised to children that comes with food and a beverage for one price. The default beverage is the beverage that automatically is offered with the meal. So those are the definitions of what we're talking about. And I included the definition of default here just because I think as we're talking about choice, and that comes up a lot in this conversation, the definition of default is a choice automatically made by somebody else. So as we're thinking about this, what we're doing is really opening choices up for parents is how we see this. So this is just a depiction of what could be offered, as Olga explained, that there's unflavored milk or any kind of water without added sugars. And we know that this works. Disney Resorts adopted this over 10 years ago, and you can see from the chart here that 68% of the time, parents stick with a default healthy beverage option. McDonald's also did this, and this data is from 2014, 2015, and they just released some new numbers in 2018, and the number of healthy beverage choices has increased another 10%. So it's almost up to, I think it's at 55% now. So we know that this works.
So Disney does it.
Disney does it.
Okay.
McDonald's does it.
That's a quote from Mayor Bagley in the paper. Disney does it? Yes, Disney does it.
So here is, just so you can have a real sense of the impact on local restaurants. When we're talking about restaurants here, we're talking about we're not talking about food trucks or grocery stores or convenience stores. We're talking about places that serve meals. They could be sit-down restaurants. They could be fast food restaurants. There are a total of 218, according to public health, the way we classify these things in Longmont. Right now, 80 are serving children's meals, or I'm sorry, so it's 37% serving children's meals. 92% of those are currently offering sugary drinks. So there are 74 restaurants that would be impacted by this policy. And at this point, Sean Gaffner, who owns Smoke and Bowls, The Roost, and Hefe's, who's been an amazing member of the Healthy Longmont Coalition and has voluntarily adopted this himself, is here to talk about the business perspective.
Hey y'all, thanks for having me. Not that you have a choice. I think I get to just show up and talk, so I may do this more often. Tuesday nights, huh? 10 years ago, I heard it said that restaurants are the heart of a city, and that's always since then kind of been part of the grid through which I filter decisions to just responsibly run restaurants. It's actually been printed on our menus the last 5 years, and it's why we chose from the very beginning to give 10% of all of our profits back towards just back to the community. We've given over $120,000 to help local families in the process of adoption. We've helped 8 kids come home that wouldn't have been able to. Without that, it's why I've always kind of done the extra work to responsibly source local and sustainable products that we sell. A few years ago, when we started seeing all the statistics about single-use plastic, I personally spent quite a bit of time and resources towards to figure out how to eliminate those from our restaurants. And it's been about 2.5 years with all 3 restaurants now, no single-use plastic there. Still pressuring the companies we order from to stop packaging things in bags. But and so it was really clear when about a year ago I started seeing the statistics about sugary beverages and the effects on kids' health. And so we look at, okay, well, how can we be more responsible with what we do inside the restaurants? And for us, and when we changed the menu about a year ago to where it used to say, kids' meal includes, I think it listed like sodas, lemonade, juice, water, or milk. So we changed it to just say includes water or milk. And that for us and what we communicate to our staff, specifically our servers, is that this isn't us, ever wanting to like shame parents if they ask for a soda or even tell them how to parent, but really rather it's us partnering with parents. I have 4 kids myself, and so I know what it's like when you go to a restaurant and said it includes a soda. Some of them even have includes dessert or pictures of milkshakes, or that's a fight every single time, even with the best kids that know it's not going to come. And so for us, it feels more like partnering with parents to not have that fight, especially maybe 20 years ago when it was a lot more rare and more of a special occasion to go out to dinner. It was probably way more common and fairly harmless to let your kid have a soda because it's special. But now I see the same families especially between multiple restaurants, 5 to 10 meals a week families are going out now. And so for us, this just feels like, how can we be responsible with these families that are eating out 5 to 10 times a week, or 5 to 10 meals a week and right now. And every once in a while we have parents that ask, hey, can we substitute a lemonade or a soda for the milk? And my staff knows our number one core value is that we're a yes restaurant. And so it's always a resounding yes, absolutely. Free refills, sure, like extra spoonfuls of sugar. Like, you're the parents, you can parent them. But for us, it really feels like just trying to be helpful. And
free refills on chicken wings? No, just kidding.
Maybe for you guys.
I'll test that theory.
Yeah. And so, yeah, that's that. I don't know if you guys have any questions. I know some people have asked about, like, what about the costs? Because soda's really inexpensive. But what we've found is, since it said just water and milk, like 70% of the times they just say water. And so I think, if anything, we're spending a little bit less money on beverage costs for kids because with my family, with my kids, we always just get water, and they know that now. But anyway, so it's not that now instead of spending a nickel on a soda, we're spending 25 cents on a glass of milk. It's we're serving 70% water.
All right, great. Thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate it. Karen?
So just a couple more slides, and then we'll turn it over. So as Olga had mentioned initially, the coalition here in Longmont, Boulder County Public Health, they have done a tremendous job of doing outreach and education for the past 3 years. And one of the things that, if council would like us to continue on this discovery and finding out, what the community's appetite is for this particular ordinance, that we would do some additional community engagement. We would primarily work with our Engage Longmont process. Obviously, restaurant owners are very busy. They have a lot going on. They don't have a lot of time to go to meetings. And so what we would do is that we have done some preliminary work with our communications and marketing staff around how to set up an Engage Longmont site with stories, questions and answers, community forums to make it easy for restaurant owners to be able to weigh in. Because as you saw that, there are 70 some restaurants that would be directly impacted by this ordinance if we choose to move forward with that. So we need their voice, we want their input in order to this to be successful if council chooses to move forward. So we will have a kind of a restaurant site and as well as a community site, because lots of people have opinions about this. And so we also will indicate how Boulder County Public Health has resources and abilities to support restaurants to come into compliance with this ordinance if we choose to move forward with that. And certainly based on the input that we get from the community, if there are some modifications to the ordinance, we would certainly include those for further consideration with City Council. So really tonight we're looking for some direction and from council, some input. In particularly around the compliance issue too, is that and Eugene May, our city attorney, can help me with this. But what we would look at, or what we propose, would be is that Boulder County Public Health would be responsible for for compliance. They already are responsible for inspecting restaurants, certifying restaurants are healthy, doing things right, not making people sick. So they're already out there engaging with restaurants, and they could really be the party responsible for compliance. And if there was a violation, then they would in turn contact the city of Longmont. We would designate the staff to be their contact, and then we would go through the process of enforcement, if you will. And so we would need some direction from council about what kind of an enforcement option we would look at. So I understand, and Eugene can help me. So I understand that that certainly by the charter requires us that if we have an ordinance, then we're responsible for enforcing it. But we also have an administrative civil penalty within our code that allows us to basically enforce and violations, to deal with violations through an administrative or a civil penalty option rather than a criminal one. And so so we would be looking for any direction from council in regard to client compliance and enforcement, as well as anything else that we had in the very drafty ordinance that we included in the packet. So questions, direction, anything that you would want to direct staff to either move forward in this way, stop, anything in between.
Councilmember Christensen?
I do think that this is a very good idea. I think that all government is a balance between the individual's rights and the community's rights. And in this case, I think this is a modest compromise that allows people to have their choice. It's just that the default drink that comes is either water or milk, and I think that is the thing that people most misunderstand about this. We're not telling them as parents what to do. We're just saying that when you order a meal, the default choice will be one of those two choices. You can still order whatever you want. As somebody who's dragged around a car full of little boys tanked up on candy and caffeinated sugary beverages, I can tell you it would have been nice to have a choice of not giving them that, but anyway, I do think that the two sites are good. I think the two things that need to be clarified for a business probably is that if I serve somebody a drink that they asked for, will I be fined? And the answer is no, because they asked for that. And the default beverages that you're bringing are those default beverages. And I think the thing that needs to be clarified for parents is you're ordering me around and you're telling me what to do with my kids and blah, 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 blah. And no, we're actually not. We're giving you the choice of, you have a choice of milk or water. If you want other choices, then you can order them and we'll bring them. But I think this makes it very, very simple. The level of childhood decay, tooth decay, and obesity and diabetes, which all have really awful long-term consequences, is a habit that gets set up in childhood often, or it's a matter of genetics, but it's exacerbated by sugary drinks. And I think this makes it easier for a lot of parents to just say, no, these are your choices. I also, I've forgotten what I was going to say. Anyway, I also wanted to thank Sean, because he is one of the more successful businessmen in town, and he's also a good guy. And he did this voluntarily because he sees the sense in this. And I would really much prefer to have had many more businesses do this. It's much better if people voluntarily do stuff. But as we all know, people often don't make that choice. And so this to me seems like a very sensible thing. I'm not interested really in a civil penalty. I think these are pretty modest amounts, because the first one is just $35. The second was in 5 years. So that gives people a lot of time. Oh, I remembered what I wanted to say. Is there a time for a business to phase this in? I mean, I don't want to phase it in like next week. You have to do this, because they may have to reprint menus. That's very expensive.
Correct. I think Tessa Hale has from Boulder County Public Health has indicated that the health department does have resources. They want to help restaurants come into compliance. So if they need assistance in costs with reprinting menus, that kind of thing, that they would do that. And then they also would recommend a delay, or if we do move forward the ordinance and it passes, to have enough time to be able to transition and help people be successful with that.
There's always whiteout, but that's not too classy.
There is whiteout. So and I think in terms of just to clarify that the compliance is really about if you serve a children's meal, which defined as it's a one price for a beverage and a meal, that you have that correctly listed on your menu. That is really what, when public health goes in to do the re-inspections, that's what they would be looking for. If you offer that children's meal, does it have a healthy beverage? That's the level of compliance that they would be looking for.
Yeah, and I hope that would be a very modest cost to businesses to make that change. Anyway, thank you for bringing it forth.
Councilmember Martin?
Are you done? I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Well, I could move, or I don't know if you want to move it.
You gonna move it?
I move that we adopt this.
Do we
Or
direct staff to move forward?
Yes, move staff to move forward, I'm sorry. Yeah, thanks.
Second.
All right, it's been moved by Councilmember Christensen and seconded by Dr. Waters. Councilmember Martin?
I'm going to vote to move forward, but I just wanted to say, because I think some of this was stated in complicated ways, the only thing a restaurant would be out of compliance for is what it says on the menu and not what they serve or anything else. It's just what it says on the menu.
Correct.
And
Yes.
Correct.
and then the other question that I wanted to ask, and Councilmember Christensen came close to it, is chain restaurants especially have menu reprint cycles. And I would like to make sure that the ordinance takes that into account in terms of the interval required for compliance.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
That's all.
I agree with that. So, Councilmember Hidalgo Ferry?
You know,
Don't apologize. You're on council. This is what we do. Go ahead. It's your turn.
Yeah, I know it's been a long time, but so something I did want to point out that I thought was very just an astounding bit of facts is that in the United States, the health costs due to obesity-related diseases are approximately $190 billion, with about 40% of that being paid through Medicare and Medicaid, which are taxpayer, we pay for those programs. So, if my calculations were correct, that's approximately $76 billion that is being spent on obesity-related diseases, illnesses. So I am going to move forward with this, but, so some of the pushback that I've heard from constituents was that, we're government, these are choices, people still have choices, but us as a governmental institution, we are promoting and standing behind healthy drink options for healthier lifestyle. So, yes.
Dr. Waters?
Thanks, Mayor Bagley. I'm also going to support this because I think it's the right thing to do, and the data that Councilmember Hidalgo Ferring just shared is part of the reason. And we've all read the emails about becoming a nanny state and whatnot. But to say, I wonder if those who would accuse us of parenting would choose not to put their children in car seats, which government says you do, because we owe it to children for their safety. Or that we would say, use a seatbelt or not. Isn't it the law that the state says you're going to use a seatbelt because of the cost to society if you don't? So it seems to me that we're falling far short of that kind of role for the state. So we're sending a clear signal about our values and how important it is to pay attention as decision and as we heard, to make it easy for parents to make the right decision on behalf of their children. And I think it is absolutely what we ought to be doing.
All right, there's a motion on the table. Actually, I just want to say that I'm going to vote for it. However, when it comes back, I will make a motion not to include an administrative penalty if it comes back with one. I will also make a motion that we give plenty of time in order to allow them to hit their reprint cycle, because I don't look at this as us being a nanny state either. I think it's just a matter of just letting people know that, hey, water and milk come with it. And if they take the proactive step to say, hey, but we want some sugary drinks or pop or whatever, you can still do that. It's not that big of a deal. My bigger concern isn't telling parents what to do with their kids, because we're not. We're telling the restaurants how to run their business. And the only thing that I think that a business owner would be concerned with is, why are you imposing costs on me? So I just want to make sure that we're not imposing those costs, even if it means that we have to go a little bit longer in allowing them to become compliant. So, all right, we have a motion on the table. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. All right, that passes unanimously with those of us present, and Councilmember Peck is not present, and so she'll be back tomorrow. All right, thank you. All right, last but not least, let's talk about House Bill 201164 concerning the exemption of a housing authority from certain fees imposed by a water conservancy district. I assume everybody has read this. If not, take 2 seconds while I make a motion. I move that we direct staff to oppose House Bill 201164.
Second. Yeah, we all seconded.
All right, so that was moved by me and seconded by
Everyone.
We'll say Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez. Get him on the agenda for tonight. All right, and then anybody have any further comments, debate, etc.? All right, Councilmember Martin.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to say, from the Water Board, that they were pretty serious about opposing this, and they had very good reasons. So I won't go into them at length, but trust us, it's not a good plan.
All right. So that said, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. All right. That passes unanimously with Councilmember Peck absent.
Mayor Bagley,
So,
one other
yeah.
really fast thing. At Coffee with Council, there was a question about the status of the management of single-use plastic. So I just thought I'd give a very fast update as to where that is. The City Council, you may remember that you supported House Bill 1163 really in your first session. At this point, it's still in committee, so it's still churning and burning, and so I haven't heard necessarily anything. I know they've had a lot of debate about it, how to phase it in, and what it's going to look like, but that bill is still alive, and that's where it stands. So, thank you.
All right. All right. That said, let's move on to mayor and council comments. Councilmember Martin.
I just wanted to add to what Assistant City Manager Sater said, which is that the Climate Emergency Task Force also really wanted to do something about single-use plastics, and it was very sad to have to tell them that we can't tell what to do until the state decides whether they're going to act or not. So we're going to get a wishy-washy recommendation from the Climate Action Task Force, but we want to continue to promote the state taking action on this.
All right. Anyone else? All right. Seeing that we have no further comments, let's go ahead and move on to city manager remarks. Anything else?
No comments, Mayor Council.
Mr. May, attorney remarks.
No comments, Mayor.
All right. Do we have a motion to adjourn in the spirit of?
I move to. Oh, sorry. Okay, that's all right. We move to adjourn.
All right. It's been the motion has been made by a rare show of partner solidarity with council members Christensen and Martin. I shall second that. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right. We are adjourned according to 6 of us, and ironically, Councilmember Peck is absent.